It's my very sweet Sunday morning honor to introduce my dear, dear friend, and really he's everyone's dear friend, Tim Feldman. He's from Copenhagen originally, and he's been in Miami, Florida for quite a while. He had an accident in his 20s, a really life-altering accident, and then started a yoga practice with Lino Miele, and eventually going to Mysore, where he met his wife. And he's authorized, he practices with sweetness. One of the things I really like about him is he's able to practice with a little less attachment than me. And so I'm able to learn a little bit about that. He comes to the practice with honesty, caring, commitment, and most importantly, humor. So please welcome my honored guest, Tim Feldman. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, John. Pleasure to be here.
All right, let's get started. In some ways, I feel like a little, maybe too casual with you, but I want to know what first brought you to yoga, and is it the same? Like, are the things that brought you originally the same as they are now?
As you mentioned there, yeah, when I was in my 20s, I had an accident that kind of should have been fatal, but wasn't. And a friend of mine, after some rehab, after 2 years of rehabilitation, I was a dancer at the time. A friend brought me to the Jiva Mukti Center in East Village in New York City, where I was trying to make it as a dancer, Frank Sinatra style. That first class, and in those days, the Jiva Mukti Center was very, very close to Ashtanga yoga. It was kind of like a free Ashtanga yoga class. And my understanding is that the teachers, pretty much everyone, was practicing with Eddie Stern when they weren't teaching Jiva Mukti style. So I think my first class was very Ashtanga inspired. Of course, I had no idea about what yoga was in general. But I walked away from that class feeling like this is exactly what my body needs. It was like my body's like thanking me for whoever it was, thanking someone for those yoga asanas. And I continued doing that. And I would say, and then later, like I met Lino Miele, and he kind of like, my passion got specialized a little bit more, like into the Ashtanga method, which I've been doing since. But all the way up through, like what I'm doing every day with my body is I'm trying to make sure it doesn't succumb to the state that these injuries can kind of like crumble into. You know, I have to make sure there's certain parts of my body that I gotta work every day, and if I don't, then they get uncomfortably present with me. So that's very much why I do asana, or that's very much one part of it. I would say that my intention on the asana has changed over the years. And whereas I used to think it was super fun to do asana, I just couldn't get enough, you know, the whole, like the way they looked and the way they felt, I was just like a big kick for me. Mm-hmm. Now I feel like getting on my mat is lots of effort. I just turned 54 last week. I think it was last week approximately. And like I'm finding myself struggling more with getting on the mat, and when I'm on my mat to finish my practice. But there's something that I'm getting from going on my mat every day and finishing my practice, which is much more subtle and so valuable, so I can't find it anywhere else. And I don't know what to call it, but I think it's something like getting to know what this life is and how to maneuver and navigate as a human being inside myself, with other people, in life in general.
Yeah, there's a seeking, I think, in general of the subtle as we age, you know, like, and that becomes more and more a cool part of the practice. Just was thinking about when I first started, I felt like there was this uncovering of like, there were all of these previous things I was doing. Like for you, it was dance, but for me, there were other things that I felt like had kind of made my body all tense in certain areas. And then suddenly, you know, with yoga, there's like places to breathe that I never knew. So physically, I think was the big part. But, you know, as we practice more and more, I think we have to, it becomes a little bit more about breathing and on it, like, and how you can work on the mind, I think.
I agree. And it's like how you can exist in your body, and how it's almost like an exploration. It's like going into a new city and trying to figure out where's the best coffee shop, you know, and what's the dangerous street, you know, what's fun to do here. And it's like the body too. It's like you get this whole new map to the body.
Yeah.
And you have gone through a similar thing as I. Like, what is it now? Is it like 7 years ago, John, that you had your fun motorcycle trip in Mysore?
Oh, that was actually 4 years ago now.
It's only 4. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
just 4, yeah. Yeah. And we can talk a little bit about injuries in a second, but let's shelve that for a minute. You had a dance background, right? And so do you feel like there was a layover, or how do you see how dance relates to yoga? How did it help you in the practice, or are there like places where they overlap?
Yes, for sure. When I was a kid, I was a competitive swimmer. And I think one of the things I learned about that was breathing. But also I learned discipline, you know, and that you got to work for what you want to get. So I think that like part of our commitment that we are required to have in this practice, I think that got pet in those early years. So I think has brought that with me in my entire life. Some acceptance of tapas, you know, that change doesn't necessarily feel comfortable.
Yeah.
That you got to put some leg work in. So I think I brought that with me. And then in my training and education as a dancer, like there is something very important there, where we're being very technical, the way that we're using the body. We're being very, very analytical. And that's the only way really to make it work well and not to break down. So I feel that what I'm bringing into my practice from dance is a very analytical, technical approach, which has become very important because of the injuries I carry. Like I would not be able to do most of what I do if I hadn't pursued from that, like breaking down into simple movement mechanics, everything. Like I was offered to have invalid pension like in my 20s, you know. So like, and the doctors at that time, they said to me, what are you going to do now? You know, you can't dance anymore, and you can't, you know, run and stuff anymore. So it was like a long hard look back into how is the body functioning and how can I move my body. So that's very much influencing the way I practice, and certainly the way I teach also.
Yeah. And to that end, I feel like you're really good at kind of finding that foundation and exploring that, the subtlety of that. I remember like going to one of your workshops and, you know, kind of you focusing and honing in on the Hastapadangustasana and like the subtle details that are going on there. And then there's this funny thing. I was just reading a little bio about you that, you know, you like to say you take it at Uranus. And I didn't write this one on the list I gave you, but I'm going to ask you anyways. So does the Mula Bandha change? Like so each asana for me in my thinking has like a slightly different foundation. And I've just been thinking about this today. does the mula, the root, change at, like, if you're in shoulder stand, is the root the same? You know what I mean? So each asana has a different foundation, and we're exploring that relationship with the ground and our new seat, you know, our asana, our seat to there. Does the mula change? And again, I didn't give you any time to think about it, but I was just thinking how that relates to mula bandha.
I was just gonna say, no worries. I'll pull that right out of my mula bandha. Yes, I think that it is changing all the time. What, like, this whole root action is doing for us, this mula bandha thing. And as far as I can see, the basis of mula bandha is it's a stabilizing principle that we use in the body and the mind, in the emotions. And we have basically two guiding principles when we work with the physical body. One is mobility and the other one is stability. And we work with that in contemporary physical therapy, but we also work with that in ancient yoga wisdom and perception of the body and the mind, that there must be stability. And from that stability, then we can start to move into action, which is the mobility idea. And as far as I can see in my own practice, I use mula bandha as a stabilizing factor. And I find it the root, the mula bandha action in the pelvic floor, the root of all stability in the body and mind and emotion. And then the Uddiyana bandha is that other thing that we take as secondary, and that grows out of almost the same point, also in the pelvic floor, and that carries the potential, the unused potential that the mula bandha sets up, that carries that into action in the body.
Yeah.
So and there's moments when the mula bandha is just, in some asanas, it's just there. It, like, that condition is just there. Like in some of the inversions or forward bends, it's just there. So we don't really need to engage into the mula bandha or be very active on it. Where at other places it's just not there, and the only way to have it is to, in varying degrees depending on the asana, to do it a lot or do it a little.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Just that there's like kind of a tethering, an anchoring, you know, like you said, a stabilizing, centering point, you know, like this is my
rooting,
this or something. And then the Uddiyana is almost this flat, you know, this like prana patterning upward.
Yeah.
So the foundation, but there's still those components, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, and the success lies in trying to figure out which one to emphasize. You know, like, do I need more stability now, or do I need more mobility now? But it's not about removing it all, one or the other. They need to be there, just like Abhyasa Vairagya or Sthira Sukham. It needs, there's that how much effort and how much. Say again?
I said Atman and Paramatman.
Maybe, perhaps, yes. Well, how much me and how much not me? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Someone asked. Well, I feel like you excel at practice without attachment. Just in this may just be your last.
Say that.
Yeah, your last like maybe 15 years or something practicing next to you quite a lot. I always enjoyed your lightheartedness, and even off of the mat, I feel like you'll see something happen and you're just like, oh, okay. And so that's really a nice thing. Does that relate to pranayama? Does that relate to like extending the breath at all? Like learning how to let go of, that's one question. And then also, what do you think are ways to keep a light heart in your practice? Just for most of us out there that aren't like you, that get kind of attached to things.
Well, I'm really, I think what you're seeing is my my old profession as a performer in full flourish right there about the non-attachment. I'm just faking it, man. So I don't know, if I feel very unattached to the practice, but I think we all try to have some balance in how hard we want something and what we do about it. But perhaps it's also, what it is we're trying to achieve, right? It's like, I think like the last years, putting the leg behind my head has not been a goal in itself. And it's more the practice of it. Like an example, I remember a couple of years ago, I was in Mysore. I think you were there at the same time. We might have been right next to each other on the mat. And I had a really day. I was so tired. I'd been practicing too hard for too long. And you know how it is. Sometimes you don't sleep and you had pizza the day before, or you didn't, or something, right? And I remember going in on the mat, and I almost stayed at home just to take my own little private ladies holiday.
Yeah.
But went to practice, and practice felt really shit. And I was sitting there trying to go into Dvipada, and I was just constantly in flux between, I hate this, why do I have to do this? This is awful. It is so, wow, why am I doing this to myself? I should have not come today. And then just sliding over that same edge, going into, oh, poor me, I have to do this, it's so poor me. And just like from anger to self-pity and back, I just fluctuate like foo, 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 foo. So I certainly didn't feel unattached to that day. I can tell you that. But I think that principle, I think it had never been as clear for me that day, that how anger and self-pity is so alive inside of me, even when I'm doing things that I have chosen to do and that I love to do and I love to share in ever so many ways. Mm-hmm. And I feel privileged and everything about having. So I think it's kind of like that process, right? That's a good example of how I feel that the practice is healing and helping me understand myself as a human being and therefore other people. And exactly that day where everything was hardest, I needed to go to that age to experience that new realization about myself. And it's things like that drives me.
Yeah, I agree. There's,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's time, like the yoga is where you're kind of like just letting go. Like you're just like seeing, I too get in these places where I'm just like, I can't do it, and then just like that place of just see is what I like to say, like that not know, like letting go and just kind of proving yourself wrong, which is to say like, letting go of that idea, but I'm not good at it. I feel like you are.
You are. I don't know. I think I've always experienced you as lighthearted, and when you are on the mat there next to me, putting everything you've got in right now, right there, and when you're done, you're done. Yeah. Then we are down having, way too strong chai at Amrit afterwards with all the young Indian guys.
I made a chai in honor of our talk, but it's about the same size, right?
I was going to say, if you hadn't had the tea things out, it would look like you had some German brew going on right there in that cup.
This is my coffee and tea mug. That's the size I need most. Okay, this is a question I've had. So yoga is often about, like we mentioned before, yoga is about what you can't see. As David Williams likes to say, yoga is what you can't see, which he's getting from the Yoga Sutras, Sukshma Linga Parayatvam. So as we move online, though, as we get more and more we're seeing, it's like it becomes visually oriented, and social media is visually oriented, and teaching for you and I online is like visually oriented, not just the practitioner's perspective. How do we keep it more subtle, and how do we communicate that to students and practitioners other than just saying, you know, stay with your breathing? You know, do you have any ideas or thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think, you know, they talk about that there's different kinds of people. Some are more audio kind of people and visual people and so forth. And I think I'm like in
We've talked about
between.
this.
Yeah, I think
I'm
I'm like
more
visual by,
audio
say again?
because I'm more audio, and you're like the dance, you know, more visually, I think.
Visual kinesthetic is kind of the senses that comes easy to me in some way. So take my words here with a grain of salt. But I don't know. I have found that it's not so difficult to get people to tune into a more subtle practice online. If you had asked me this question half a year ago, I would have said, absolutely, I do not want to teach online. As a matter of fact, I did not want to teach online. I had a few things out of my wife, Kino McGregor's Omstars platform in support of my wife, but I was not so interested so much in that media for yoga teaching, asana teaching at least. So, but then this whole coronavirus has somehow forced us to get on Zoom, right? And I have been so positively surprised by the ability to get the yogic teachings across on this platform.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I still really wish that I'm often coming to a place with a practitioner on Zoom, either a new practitioner I haven't met before or someone I've worked with for a long time, where I want to be there, you know, face to face with my hands on their body, or, you know, being able to demonstrate a little in front of something like that, right?
That
But
touch
I
is
have,
like
yeah, the
just
touch.
human interaction, I think is very important.
Yes, but I do feel it's possible to get there. It just takes a little bit more time. But for instance, like I was just teaching this week, and there was this really awesome practitioner that I haven't worked with before, and who was very willing to work hard. And somewhat what I think we got to focus on was, when do I put myself and my willpower into my asana, and when do I let something else guide me, and what is the difference between these, you know?
Yeah.
When is it me, and when is it Ishvara, or God, or nature, or something else than just like, you know, if it's only me trying to drive the point home at all times, is it still yoga?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that, and I in my experience, that girl there, that practitioner, she really got the point. And it looked like her entire, like maybe not, but like there was a definite change in her approach, where she didn't just try to hit every point as hard as she could, but she was kind of putting in her effort, and then she was also listening what else is there. And for me, that is very subtle, and I feel that was successfully addressed on the Zoom platform. That gives me hope
Yeah.
somehow, you know.
I agree. There are some benefits to it for sure. I was just wondering, like, um, is there a way to like get beyond that, you know, um, the subtle things, like you mentioned, like just seeing someone's breathing and like trying to, I feel like we have to use whatever senses we have and whatever we can do, you know, to try to help people. And then I have a follow-up question that I was just thinking of, like, because there's like, yeah.
May I just jump in there? So I agree, there's limitations to the Zoom that we can only do in the yoga style. There's no doubt about it, and I miss it. But it's what we got. And I think
Yeah.
there is a lot of really positive things. And I would even say one of the first Zoom classes I taught, I noticed a practitioner I worked with for a long time. Suddenly I noticed that this person is not using his legs very much. And that is the reason for his prana not really getting into his body, like in the standing asanas as an example. And I had never seen it before. But the reason I saw it was because he had his camera focused from his toes to his waist.
Wow.
All I could see him doing, his standing asanas, I was sitting there and I was looking, I was like, that's not right. Wait a minute, why are you not thrusting into your legs and stuff? So, and I worked with him, not a lot, but a little bit over the last 3-4 years. And suddenly, because of Zoom, I saw that. So there's also, there was no other distractions. There was just his legs there in front of me. So, where in the yoga shala, there's, 20 other people I have to kind of navigate among. So yeah, that's good and bad.
Yeah. I think because we're practicing at home a lot now, there's a need, especially after like the initial month or so, it's kind of worn off. It's now 2-3 months for some of us. So I've found in my own practice that there needs to be this like sense of accountability. So I try to make a commitment to go to Mysore, India once a year to study. But that accountability is really tough sometimes, like to like reflect and be like, have someone, to face that. So I think particularly since a lot of that Pattabhi Jois stuff came out, and even a lot of things right now in these times, there's a tendency to want to go, like you were saying, like that inner voice of just like, I don't want to put my leg behind the head, versus like, I'm just going to follow what my teacher says 100% and jump off a cliff, those two extremes maybe aren't the best, but we need to kind of we have to wrestle with them maybe. And I'm just wondering, like, what's been your experience with like your inner voice through the years? Like have you listened to that? Do you like that wrestling of, do you just do your own thing? Do you just like, when is the time to maybe like do your own thing and listen to your inner teacher? Or and what are the dangers of that versus just listening to an outer teacher? And then how do you feel like what your practice is of that, whatever it is, and does that relate to students and their path? Like, I often find students are kind of on this place where they need to listen initially, like they need to just get the basics down of just listening to the count, like learning the sequence. That's like a big part of like, just have a go at it. So what are your thoughts about all that?
That's a huge question. There's so much to say about that, right? But I somehow feel that the practice is a microcosmos of living, and what the practice offers us is a possibility to make things very clear, like crystal clear, where when we meet the same principle out in life, they're so complex to understand what's going on. So but when we meet a particular principle in our practice is black and white, then we can easily identify it in our life. Mm-hmm. And then I find that life is very difficult to navigate, and I need some guidance out there in general. And we have parents to do that. We have school teachers, and if we're lucky, later we have influential friends or mentors, or even some kind of a wise person there of some kind. And without these people,
a spouse,
certainly so. And without these people, we're just fending for ourselves, and we're trying to reinvent the wheel and figuring out what living is. So I feel that having a wise person in our life, someone that has walked the path before us, is very, very useful. And I think that is the teacher's or the guru's role in the yoga room, is to do all of that at best. And if not, then just at least within this little microcosmos of learning how to do asana and understanding why, like what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it in the yogashala. But and if I can bring a really ridiculous analogy, a friend of mine is a personal dresser. You know, like you go to a department store and you can hire her, and then she will tell you what you should buy to look good.
Oh,
and
like a style
stylist
person.
kind of thing, right? Like how to put nice clothes on your body. Right. So she works from the idea that you need to create a wardrobe. And to create this wardrobe, you need to have all your basics down. You need all the base layer of pants and stuff that kind of like goes with everything and is functional, and you have something for like a festive moment and something for every day and so forth. Now, when you have that, then you can start to put in, you know, your personal bits, and you can have that flamboyant golden Versace shirt if you want, but don't start there.
Yeah.
And I feel it's almost the same with the practice. And I think that's what you're saying, like, let's get the basics down here. Let's get your wardrobe down. And I think that Pattabhi Joy's Krishnamacharya's construction of these 6 series, these 3 series, however we want to see it, that is just trying to get the basics down. And when those basics are down, then we can use that as a measurement tool to figure out what is working in our life and what is not working in our life, what is working in our personality and what is not, what is healthy in our body and what is not, what's healthy in our mind, in our emotion, and what is not. And then we can kind of level our, we can not level, what's it called, measure what's going on inside of us, somehow calibrate, and from there calibrate what's going on. And then we can try to figure out, should I take 10 breaths on the left side instead of on the right side in this asana because I'm tighter or blah, blah, blah? Or should I, if let's say that Supta Kurmasana is the easiest thing that you've ever done when you're in primary series, well, maybe throw in Dvipada instead. And vice versa. You know, if you are doing second series on a day after a lot of travel, or, you know, first Christmas day after you had lots of food, then throw in Supta Kurmasana instead of, what's it called, Dvipada, because it's the same idea, it's just lighter or heavier. But I think if you had asked, if you'd given me that option from the beginning, I wouldn't have known how to navigate it. Yeah. I would just go with, I feel a little bit like this, I feel a little bit about that. And then when we later go deeper into yoga, we realize that's a really bad measuring tool. I like it, I don't like it. It doesn't work, man. You know, well, there's gotta be something else.
I feel like there's a lot of wrestling there. So I have this thing I've been thinking of lately, that many of us get interested in this practice for that reason, because we have to like let go, you know, like, so a lot of the people that I know that are interested in this practice, we'll just say they're kind of fighters. They're like fighter mentality. And then they come to this point where they recognize that like, that's kind of keeping them from, you know, like this, like, I don't want to listen to this rule, you know. And for me, this practice requires a lot of that surrender and a lot of just like, okay, here's the count. Let's just see how you can deal with that, you know. And then you don't want to, and I see that all the time come up. But then I also see the other extreme where I become like a robot, you know, like just blinded, you know, with my blinders on, and I don't want that. So there's that dynamic, I feel like, is of keeping both edges is, you know, it's useful.
I totally understand what you say. What I find is like, if you take the time and you put some good time into this practice, you start to get a really good feeling for what the practice can do for us.
Yeah.
And for me, that has generated a lot of trust in this practice. I've seen so many good things happening to me in my life, in all aspects of my life, because of this practice. So that means that I rarely look, if I may say so, outside the practice for solving an issue I find in the practice. Like if I'm boxing with an asana, I very rarely think I won't do it. Instead, I'll think, how can I make this work for me? Because I see it almost as a little bit as a sacred tool, because there's a teaching in that particular moment that I might be avoiding. So, and then I feel that after a while, it's like, you know, primary series is supposedly the easy part, but like take primary series with Sharat and like get your butt kicked. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So, and then I feel like I'm like caught in this primary series shape, but it's my job to make it livable.
Yeah.
You know, so we fill up that empty shell of dogma with meaningfulness and juice and gusto for ourselves, just like any other moment, man. You know, like just like getting out of bed in the morning, you know, drinking a bad cup of coffee or whatever is our karma in that moment.
Yeah, there's this, and like Manjushri, you have on your left shoulder there, you know, he's cutting, he has, you know, the sort of discrimination. So we have to do that like on ourselves a little bit, but we also have to like think about this external. He's also holding the Dharma, the scriptures, you know, so that's the external relationship of this tug of war between like Swadhyaya and tapas, you know, and
yes, and to be able to cut through that stuff and figure out what is the right information in this moment, what is the wrong information, what's the right impulse, what's the wrong impulse. We have to do some training. We have to clear out, you know, all those ridiculous, petty tendencies of just being a spoiled brat or being a self-deprecating person or whatever is present in us, like to get to some kind of base before we can take good decisions.
Yeah.
And that's what the practice does for me. It cleans me up somehow a little bit.
This is a question that I kind of liked. So a lot of people, they are attracted to the practice through, particularly, as I mentioned before, in these times with these shiny images, these, you know, edited, you know, bright lights. But I find in my own practice that it's often what I like to call the ugly vinyasa. Like, for example, it's like the lift up after Kapotasana, you know, like the ones that you wouldn't never post, or like the, you know, the upward dog after Buddhasana, right? Like those ones that are just like hard, those vinyasas, and they can be like on the mat, like tangibly, these ugly sort of positionings, but also like it could just be like Akam after your mother died, you know, like just like that it probably doesn't look that good, but for you and your personal yoga practice, that's where growth is happening. So my question is, in this time and in like, how do you convey such a visually oriented platform, or how do you reorient expectations of students that like this is not necessarily what they're seeking, is like a nice Alessandro, I love you Alessandro, you know, edited video, you know, but like this idea, which is not really, at least in my thinking, not, you know, what's going on in yoga practice.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I think, you know, every sense organ has its corresponding possibility, you know, and like when we are working in the visual, then we are working in the visual, we're not working in the kinesthetic. We see a beautiful picture of a girl in a bikini on doing like some fancy asana on a beach somewhere, and what we get is the poetry of the visuals. we don't really get the poetry of the kinesthetics. We might be able to infer some about the other senses in there.
Yeah.
But it's almost like if we're working in the visuals, it's like, yeah, what can you do? You got to work in the visuals. If you work in the kinesthetics, you got to work in the kinesthetics, but it's a different media. You can't really jump over. And of course, in these ancient days, times, we are in such a visual presence everywhere, and Instagram being the perfect example, the epitome maybe of that. So what we see is just a lot of very handsome, beautiful, privileged, able-bodied people with nice suntans and expensive clothing, doing really beautiful stuff. And there's a limitation to that, but on the positive side, I think it does inspire. You know, it has a potential to inspire. It has also the potential to turn off and get some people afraid. If you're not as pretty, if you don't have that suntan, if you don't have that particular yoga outfit, you might not ever want to go there. That's of course a very sad thing. But like, I don't know, I think that the whole Instagram situation and all that, and all the visuals and all the beautification of yoga, I just hope that it can inspire. And I notice on my own Instagram platform, if I put something up which I think is like deep and yogic, you know, of some kind, I put that up. And then the next day I put up like the best yoga picture I have of myself, you know, like, we don't tell nobody, but during that photo shoot, I was holding my breath like nobody's business, you know, just to hang on to that shot until Alessandra said, okay, I got the shot. And then I get so many more comments and, you know, likes on it and all that. So it's very tempting to go in that direction.
Yeah.
I don't know if I had all answered what you said, but I think there's an inspiration possible there. But of course, yoga goes way beyond it. But like, honestly, I'm pretty happy if I can, you know, put on some small shorts and do an asana that looks very hot. And then I get 3 yoga students into the yoga shala on that photo. That's pretty good, you know. Then now you showed up at the shala. Now we can actually teach some yoga. 2 of them are probably going to go again, but at least maybe the last one is going to stay and learn a little bit of something.
Yeah.
Is that where you were going, John, or?
Yeah, I guess the question is how do you, I think the goal, and you know this, of the yoga practice is not about the looks, you know. In the end, it's, I mean, I don't know, maybe you differ with me. And so how do we reorient the students' expectations of that? Like, you know, and that's okay, I think, too. If someone comes in and they just want like to look a certain way, I think that's an okay, I think that's totally a good goal, you know. But and this is what I was going to ask next, is as you read and study, and one thing I've appreciated about you and Mysore, you know, you and I used to go study with Dr. Rao and Dr. Jayashree, and there was that study component to you and I's path, and really transformation from like a learning mind, hopefully, you know, vritti, changing samskara, sort of shifting behavior. So I think what I was getting at was like, how do you, like, are you able to like loop people? Because I find it hard, especially because I'm in a gym sometimes, that they walk in already thinking, oh, it's just exercise. You know, this is the space, the desk I sit in for, you know, learning, and then the gym is where and those aren't supposed to like go together, you know, like marry those things. So I guess what I'm asking is like, do you have a way to integrate, you know, like kind of baby step people in to maybe some of the other parts of Or do you, do you think that that's even, do you just let them do it on their own? Maybe that's probably the best way.
I don't know. I think I generally get happy when people show up in the yogashala,
Yeah.
because I think there's potential in it, and I
Yeah.
have such trust in this method. What we've learned from Patanjali by the method of Krishnamacharya and Pattabhi Jois, I have such trust in this because I've felt it in my own body and I see it in so many other people. So I think like if I can just, and here's what I think about our method is that put it on anybody's body, very fit athletic person or not fit at all, that hasn't used their body much in their entire life, and you put them through the first paces like Surya Namaskaras and they feel it.
Yeah.
They instantly feel it, and they feel it they feel a positive thing about it. It's like, wow, this is something. And then by that, and that happened for me when I started also, by that positive experience, there comes a trust that there can be something else. Like if I can get across to you that look, you lose a couple of pounds and you sleep better at night and you're a little more joyful the rest of the day, and the girls are looking at your biceps, and then if I can get that across to you, then you're gonna come back. And then slowly as that increases, then there is what also comes back with you is an interest in more.
Yeah.
And then I can start to introduce, more subtle things, like maybe you're working too hard. Maybe you can like breathe a little more, and so forth. And then like slowly some people leave and some people stay, and the people that stay, they then go to the more subtle layers. I think it's possible to start at wherever somebody is, kindle that, as Tim Miller says, kindle that fire, and then constantly with this like second agenda in mind, to move people towards yoga because we believe that it's good for them. We don't believe it's taking them for a ride.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking is the mat is better than any book I've ever read. Like the mat, more to learn about my swadhyaya, the more study, and if you dive into that ocean, and really like you have from your dance background, and also just like understanding what sort of patternings are going on in your own mind, you can really like learn, see so much, I think.
I agree. I've been playing around here in this Corona time with a workshop format that I called Applied Patanjali, and about how Patanjali is not a theoretical thing from like some weird dude back in time, but actually that Patanjali's teachings comes out of the same questions that we carry ourselves every day, whether we know it or not.
Yeah.
And that what he's offering is some solutions or some suggestions to how to come to resolution with ourselves. And I feel that it has been possible to get some really deep philosophical thinking through, because the people that shows up has an established practice. They have that mat. And because of that mat, then we can start to truly understand why you shouldn't care about the result. You should just look at what you're doing. That you should do your duty and don't worry about the result. Now that sounds beautiful, right? But would you ever be able to understand that if you were not boxing around with your own asana on that mat every day?
You start, the demons come out sometimes on your mat, and then you realize it's you. It's like, oh no, I created this. There's no escape.
Can I call it my wife's problem? That would be so nice.
Yeah. Okay, I got another question. This is kind of a hard one. Let's talk about teacher trainings. Do you think that teacher trainings have, or the lack of teacher trainings in Ashtanga, have created kind of a dumbing down, of some of the, as I put, like the Yoga Mimamsa school, like this school of just follow it, do the thing. Yeah, ritualized, and it'll all happen if you just follow along.
Yes.
Whereas some of the other, traditional Indian philosophical schools have a slightly different approach, where you should investigate, you should read, you should do all of these things. I find, and maybe I'm naive, but it seems to me like the short time that I've been going to Mysore, India, that it gets more and more every year, a little less study intensive. They're trying to change that, I think, because I really enjoyed Lakshmisha's course that he had. It was really nice to do that. But so hopefully that will change. But what do you think about the lack of trainings? I feel like for me, I don't get to process the material as much as a one that might be leading these, but also students aren't able to process that sort of stuff as much. Do you think it's been a hindrance?
Well, I think education is important. So yeah, as you mentioned before, going to Mysore and being in this place where there is an unparalleled amount of knowledge hanging around, because there's the Mysore Sanskrit College, the University of Philosophical Studies there. It's just like Pattabhi Jois was just one dude out of a lot of people, and that was very knowledgeable about yoga. And we have found other people in that same city that is just mind-blowingly interesting to work with.
Yeah.
But so I think that education is very possible, and I think that's what's keeping me doing my asanas with all that, without Rao and these people. I might have burned out on the mat, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I think that education is very, very important, and in the West that usually takes the shape of some kind of a workshop, whether it's a day or a week or a weekend or longer. And because of everything seems to be like working in this capitalistic market venue platform, then teachers training has become it, because people need to look at something that they're gonna get very specifically from doing this. And if we are not sure what that means, just try to tell your parents that you're gonna spend the next month and $5,000, on putting your leg behind the head. The first thing that's gonna be is like, why are you doing that? What are you gonna get out of that? And I think if we then can justify, well, I can become a teacher and I can earn my own living, they're gonna go, all right, So I think it makes a lot of sense that in the West, the teachers training has come about, but I just think it's an unfortunate construction, because we all know that 200 hours in any modality of life is worth nothing. I think like if you go to university and a friend of mine wants to be a physical therapist, and it takes 3 years to become a physical therapist assistant. That's 3 years of university studies, full-on studies, like heavy duty anatomy and all kind of stuff. That's to be a physical therapist assistant. Then I think he has another 3-4 years in front of him if he wants to become licensed. So, and as you know, as yoga teachers, we are like jack of all trades. We have to be parent, best friend, hopefully not lover, teacher, doctor, psychiatrist, physical therapist, the whole priest, the whole thing, right? So 200 hours is enough to show someone how a movement looks like, and that's it. As soon as I'm in trouble with the movement, you're gonna be in trouble, because you don't know how you're gonna get my body into that situation. That thing we only know from practice. We need to practice and practice and practice, so we can get around that and texturize that experience so much. Now, so that's the 200-hour teachers training. I do not believe in them. But what I do believe in, I think maybe that's what you're saying, talking a little bit about here, is that there is some information that that is kind of being offered in these formats. And that I am all for. I'm all for it. My daily living is like I teach mostly weekend workshops. And my standard phrase is, this workshop is to give you a little bit of detailing to your daily practice. If you don't have a daily practice, then where are you going to put this information? Then it's just been entertainment. Then you could as well have gone to the mall and seen the new James Bond movie and had yourself a hamburger, because then there's nothing. Then it's just entertainment kind of thing. Yeah. But I think the practice is the first thing, and then as much information about that you can get, you can layer it with that, and that can be: are you interested in the body? You go that way. Are you interested in the mind? You go that way. Are you interested in like psychology and emotion? You go that way. Are you interested in devotion and religion? You go that way. Blah blah blah.
Breathing practice.
Breathing, yes.
So this.
What do you think? What do you think, John? What's your thoughts on that? Like, about how to learn yoga? Should we only practice, as you say, like as we go to Mysore?
I think it's really hard. I teach at a university, and so it's based on the premise of you get a sheet of paper or you get a grade, or that you get some sort of accomplishment, result. Mm-hmm. So and then structure, I find, is really useful. So just like blindly like letting the mat be your teacher, or some Indian teacher kind of guide you without too much instruction. I feel like for me, I've always wanted both, or more of a component of. But I also agree that 200 hours is not, does not a teacher make. So maybe there just needs to be a renaming of like a study, but who would sign up just to be a student? Yes, I want a 200-hour student certificate.
Very few, right?
Yeah. So I think that's maybe the inherent problem, is we're all not willing to admit that, we're really just not very learned in these things.
If I may just throw Patanjali in here. So Patanjali, he when we're trying to obtain information, knowledge, then he mentions as you know, that he mentions 3 possibilities. You can learn from a source outside of you that we can call like from a trusted friend or so forth, like the university that is there for your best, and that's a good one. But the one that is suggested for everybody, and especially for the yogi, is the personal experience.
Yeah,
that is the only way we can truly know. So I think, and then in between these two, we have like inferring, which is more inference, which is more like a gray zone. So, and I think if we go into that svadhyaya and the pratyaksha, then we have that personal experience and that the learning from outside, and we put those together, then that is the best possibility. Only one is good for nothing.
Yeah.
I don't know, that was a too strong a statement, but like that, like the balance of those two is what we're looking for.
Yeah. And so there's like a whole slew of questions about the world yoga and the world, and some of you guys are already chatting about that, and we were getting to them. So we'll go ahead and start with some of that, reflecting on last week's events and the history of divisiveness, not just of what's been going on, in the yoga community, but also in the world for the beginning of time. Even some of our treasured texts talk about, like the Bhagavad-Gita, say, like they're very like caste oriented and these sorts of things. So what are your thoughts on how we can create a climate of change and inclusivity in what we do? Like, what steps can you and I take to start to bring more, because it's one thing for you and I to say in these times of, like we want to be more inclusive, but are there any practical steps that you feel like we really need to just like Manjushri behind you, like cut certain actions and start to change, like our behaviors? What do you think?
That's a fantastic question. And a very important one. And if I might just like pull into Yoga Shastra for a moment and just start there. I think first of all, I think there is such a thing as responsibility. And I think that as a yogi, we are, according to Patanjali, there is a vow that we take on the yogic path. He calls it the Mahavritam, which is like we must always live by the yamas. And you could include the niyamas. They must be present in all aspects of our life and all decisions that we take. And it doesn't matter who we are, what the circumstances are, or what time of day it is, or what I would like to do. The yamas need to be considered and needs to be the basis for the way that we live our life. And if it is not, don't call yourself a yogi. It's that simple. And I think that's important to consider, like, because sometimes in the West, we just think yoga is tolerance, yoga is peacefulness, but it's not. Like, peacefulness is the final option. And how do we get there? There must be action and there must be surrender. And if you just do one, it is not enough. Or if you do the wrong one at the wrong time, it is not correct. We need to come to a place where we can differentiate whether should I take action or should I not take action? Should I speak or should I listen? Should I do or should I not do? It's really important. Which leads us, of course, into the main query of the Bhagavad-Gita about Arjuna standing out there, being told to fight, being requested to fight, and then saying, I don't want to fight, it's too painful for me to put this fight up. And even if I win the battle, I have won nothing because I have been killing people that I love. And Krishna coming down to him and says, blah, 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 fight. And then the question is like, how are we going to come to terms with the idea that as a yogi, we should fight? And I think what's going on here is Arjuna as far as I understand the Gita, is Arjuna, his entire life has been about the greatest warrior. He's been put in the position where he needs to protect the city or the kingdom, and now's the time to protect the kingdom. If he doesn't do it, nobody does it. He could have been put in that city as a baker or as a bricklayer. In that case, he would need to bake bread and lay bricks, and he could argue, why should I pick up a fight now? But his entire life has been about pursuing the good cause as a warrior, fighting the good fight. So of course he needs to fight. He needs to do his duty there. And I think the same for us yogis. There's a moment where we need to take action, and there's a moment where we do not. And I think there is such a thing as empathy and compassion. And I think there is such a thing as collective empathy and compassion. And sometimes that means step back, and that sometimes means step forward. And I think at this particular moment in time, there's a step forward that is necessary. That's my own personal opinion on that. We have individually to define which course do we step forward towards. But as far as I can see, I have a fellow man here who's in pain, who's in a lot of trouble. And it is my duty, because when he's in pain, essentially, so am I. Like, for instance, I spoke to a friend today. She lives in New York City. She was part of the demonstrations yesterday. She says the entire area of Soho and so many other, all the shop windows has been kicked in. So it's like, if that person is in pain and I'm a shop owner and I have a nice little Volvo and a house in the suburbs, I'm still going to be in pain, because that person's pain like has direct effect on my pain, whether for good and for bad. But also, if we are an empathetic type of person, then when you're in pain, I'm in pain. When I'm in pain, you're in pain. So I think we need to contemplate that a little bit. But then I think the question right now is, me as a white middle-aged male, how do I act right now? I think that is not easy at all. But I do think I need
You're not gun-toting warriors either, like if maybe that was our, I said we're not gun-toting Kshatriyas warriors either. So how do we, as in our,
as a yogi,
like what do we need to do?
Yeah, I think for me, I feel like I need to facilitate. I think I need to help facilitate. And as a white male right now, I don't think it is, appropriate for me to stand up and tell the world what I think should be done. Or maybe it is, because what I think should be done is I should kind of shut up and listen. Because I've had my day, and I'll have my day again, and I can still have my day while this is going on. But I feel like what I need to do right now is not to talk. It is to listen, to try to figure out what is it that my fellow man says is painful and necessary for him and her to live a reasonable life, a fulfilled life. And when I do that, I kind of have to listen to figure out what is it that you need, man, because I can see your pain. What is it that you need and how can I support that? How can I be support of your need right now? I recognize the issue here. What can I do? So rather than going out and taking actions that I think might be a good idea, I think I should ask, what can I do for you?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we're being asked to do right now is just look at our privilege. Like me as a white male, middle-aged, historically, there's no better position to be in living this life than who I'm born into being. And it's very uncomfortable. Yeah. And I think it's one of my jobs right now. That is to be uncomfortable and just uncertain about it and see where this takes me and all of that, and just be attentive and supportive and listening and take action according to that. But the first thing is not to bust out with my own ideas right now.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the chat room. For anyone that has questions, please feel free to post in the chat, and I'll do my best to try to answer as many of them that are appropriate as possible. So thank you all for joining us. Whoever's in charge of opening the chat room, that will be good. Yeah, I too feel like there needs to be some more tangible ways, Tim, to help. But I think you're I want to just immediately, try to fix the lack of diversity and inclusivity in Ashtanga. That's our home, our friendly home. That's because it's a problem, you just go to Mysore, and it, for me, especially with teachers trying to get them to come on this presentation, and others just trying to get, there's not so many people pull, but I want to, but I think you're right. And just listening is a good part to start, but we also have to take actions to really create that momentum, because for so many years, and will continue for downtrodden people to be enslaved. I mean, even now we say slavery is done, but there's so many enslaved peoples in the world that are really struggling. So, okay.
It's a very sensitive matter, and we need to pursue I think for me, I need to ask for help, and I'm trying to ask for help from people around me that has insights that I don't.
Yeah.
And try to put that into my perspective.
Lydia asks, hi Lydia, how do we create
Hey, Lydia.
more inclusivity and diversity in Ashtanga, which is kind of what I was, the same thing I was saying. So, but I'll just let you answer that one.
Yeah, Lydia, it's a very good question. I can tell you that I have a yoga shala on Miami Beach that I run together with my wife, Kino, and my teachers there. And we've had all these conversations about, are we diversified and multi-ethnical there, or are we not? Like my wife, Kino, she's half Japanese, so she's part Asian, and she's been boxing around in her teens with her own ethnicity, you know, trying to figure out what the heck that was about. I'm a white male from Denmark, so I've been grown up in a very homogeneous society, and now I'm over here, you know. But the majority of the people that comes to our yoga center and that teaches our yoga center are of Latin descent, of South American descent. So, you know, at this moment, are they like an ethnical minority group? Maybe in America in general, but certainly not in Miami. I think they call it a minority majority. I learned that word yesterday, I believe. So one of the things that we've been wanting to do is to open up to be like a less kind of stereotypical white art form yoga. Like it's a lot, all these like white people like me who comes to it. But then how the heck do you do that? Do you say like, okay, we should have an African American in the group here? Now that just feels like the wrong way around almost. It feels like uncomfortable. It's like, all right, what I do, I get a name of someone, I call up, I say, hey, you have the right skin color for us to be diversified. We would like to be here. That has just been incredibly uncomfortable thought for me to do it that way. But we are trying to do some things where we're reaching out to minority groups and people of less income or of more income, just to diversify the whole way that Miami Life Center is run in that way. And by my good luck, we have a practitioner and teacher there called Joseph Armstrong, who is also a white male, but who is very involved in minority activism and advocacy. So he, in so many ways, like in LGBT and in many other ways, and in what's it called? That's the correct word here, like recovery, like drug addiction and so forth, involved in that. And for him, that is kind of the way he walks. So to diversify in regards to ethnicity and different what's it called, walks of life and thought and so forth, that is the way that he lives his life. And he is in charge of workshops and marketing and outreach and so forth. So he's doing an amazing job, and we have all these things that is already going on and things that is in the making. So we're trying. I don't know if that was an answer, but
okay. Thank you. And someone mentioned Eddie started Urban Yogis, and yeah, that's like a really nice thing. And I think like skillful way, we have to think of, you and I, Tim, have to think of skillful ways that we could do things like that, where it's not like, you know, necessarily like you and I going into communities and kind of, but like maybe fostering, sharing this love of yoga that we have as a means of like creating stability and peace in the mind.
Yes. Oh, I should say like one no, I don't think I can say that until it's actually taken effect. So sorry, I was going to give an example, okay. But
we got plenty of questions coming in.
Okay.
Okay. Someone asked, do you think it's important to pre-stretch before an Ashtanga yoga practice or warm up?
No, I don't think it's important, but I do think that for myself, it like helps. And when I'm in Mysore and Sharat, he thinks that my back bend is so much deeper than I think it is. I do a little bit of stretching every day before I go down into the shala, because it just means that when he comes and pulls me into my ankles or shins or wherever he want to get me, then I don't feel like I'm going to die. but when I come home and Shadat is not like taking care of my personal practice, then I admit I'm too lazy to stretch before practice. But I do recommend it often, especially let's say you have you're practicing full primary series and there's a couple of asanas that's hard for you, say maybe Marchasana D or something, and that's a little bit still you're boxing with that even though you moved on, or maybe you haven't moved on. Then I think one way that we as practitioners can get on with our practice is to just focus on that a little bit while we're in the practice, but maybe also outside. As John mentioned earlier today, the word svadhyaya about study. So I feel that, for instance, learning Marchasana D, or just like catching your hands or getting from your hands to your wrist, there is a study there in understanding how the asana works and how the body functions in that and so forth. So there's some study that could be, you know, which muscles is involved, which part of my body, what am I actually trying to rotate, what am I not trying to rotate, and starting to wrap our head around that. And I feel like some preparatory exercises for your practice can be such a study, as a physical study.
Do they, but do they help foster like dealing with anxiety, or do you think the because this question is also coming into the chat,
Okay.
like about anxiety about backbending and catching,
Yeah.
you know, and does that pre-stretching like set you up for failure? For me, like I felt like for a long time, I used to do it for like 10 years ago. I would like warm up, you know, with Ekapada Raja Kapadasana, like just do like kind of easy kind of things. But then at some point I was like, you know what, I'm creating this whole idea of what's going to happen before me, you know, like, so I'm like laying out.
Need.
What's that?
And a new need.
Yeah, a new like measuring for failure basically, or success, you know. And so for me that pre-stretching was, so someone asked about how do they deal with fear and hesitation before backbending, or how to deal with anxiety, and I know it sounds like just a simple asana question, but it's really like, how do you do, it's similar to what's going on off the mat, you know, like these detours that come up in our practice and how we like motorcycle around them. Do we get like all like, is there going to be a detour on this road? I don't know, you know. Let me warm up for it.
Yeah, if I can like take this on a little abstract level, and so we have a word for fear in yoga, we call it apinivesha, and it is the fear of maintaining who we are or what we want and so forth. And fear always rises out of desire. Fear rises out of something that I crave, something that I want. So if you have fear, like what we can do is look at what is it that I want, because as that craving, that want is what's going to make this fear rise. The want, the craving, the desire, we call it, is the seed of the fruit, which is the fear. So if you want to let go of your fear, you need to figure out what is the seed of the fear, and the seed of the fear will always be something that you want or don't want. So if you start to feel that you get fearful around your backbending and anxiety and stuff like that, maybe you're asking a little bit too much of yourself right here. Not too much of yourself in an objective sense, but in a subjective sense. You are now starting to put rules upon what your life needs to be like, what your body needs to be like, which has nothing to do with anything else than that final goal. And then a little perspective into that would be a good idea. That, if I may go further into that, that is based in the root of ego. That is based in the root of being me and what I want. Again, there can only be a want if there's an I. Without I, there can be no want. So when there is the I, there is the wanting, and when there's the wanting, there's the fear of not getting. And if we can circumvent that whole thing by applying what we call a parigraha, non-attachment, a little step back, a little surrender to all the things that we think is important and that is necessary. And just take a step back and say, it's not so important. Let me do my best, and then that's gotta be it. And that's gotta be it for now. I want to say one more thing. Oh yeah, so that also means if there's that much anxiety, it's because the only thing that drives that point is me. It is me-ness. By the end of the day, there's like me, I want. So if we can just take the I a little bit back and not only saying, what can I get my hands on here, but what is given? So when you go into a backbend, then first take a look at can Tim do a backbend looking at what is given without Tim saying, I'm going to take what I can. So first I step away. I don't try to take anything. I just see what's there. What did God give me, or whoever, today? And then, okay, that wasn't very much, unfortunately. And then I can do it again. And then I go, okay, this is what is given again. And second time I do given, I find that more is given. And then I can maybe apply myself a little bit. So there's space for both me and, as Krishnamacharya says, for God. So there's, it's a little bit like me and God together, we'll figure it out. Not only me. Then you're going to get all scared and hate your Kapotasana very quickly.
Yeah. And I also think, and this is the important one, the avidya, right? Like the misknowing, our thinking that things are fixed. This is the start of it. Our fundamental thinking, like, I'm always going to be a bad backbender, or I'm always going to, or this is the nature of backbending for everyone. And grasping to that is where that ignorant or misknowing or misidentification starts. And then it breaks down to asmita and clinging and grasping and all that, fear.
Yes, and let's also just face that deep, like there is the principle of backbending, which is supposed to be healing. And then there is different levels of backbending. Like for instance, my backbending is so much less than John's backbending. He has this amazingly open back, also super strong and great commitment, all that kind of stuff, but so flexible. If I try to do what John does, I will break in two. Or my wife, for instance, she can wake up in the morning and then she can go into a split and then she can reach back and catch a heel. She does that before anything. On the best day of my life, after the most intense asana practice for a long time, having fasted with no food or water for a long time, I will never be able to do it. Yes. So it's like there's just levels of what we can do. And does everybody need to catch their heels in Kapotasana? I don't know. Does everyone need to catch their legs in backbend? I don't think so.
Yeah. So we're running out of time. I've got so many more questions that I want to ask you, Tim, like about motorcycle riding and yoga and so many other fun things.
Finally, the interesting bits.
he's excited. So maybe, hopefully we can come back some other time, you and I, and maybe now that we're getting a little bit better at or feeling more comfortable with being online, this can be a platform.
John, thank you for having me here today. Such a pleasure to see you. I look forward to having chai with you again on Google and Main Street. And thanks for having me and for your amazing service to the community by facilitating these talks. I'm very honored to be part of this line of amazing practitioners and yogis that you've lined up. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you too, Tim.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you so much, Tim and John, for such a deep and rich conversation today. It was a pleasure for me to be a part of it, and I know so many people benefit from the opportunity to hear the conversation between you and to ask direct questions. For this program, we are encouraging donations to directrelief.org. And we'd like to invite you to visit the Contemplative Sciences Center website, csc.virginia.edu. And if you are able and would like to donate, just look for the Give Now button there as well. We do want to remind everyone that we'll be back on our normal schedule next week, so please plan to join us this coming Friday for our conversation with Harmony Slater and Russell Case. Thank you again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you then.